You know, that powerful scene when Trey, after holding the body of his best and close friend,
Mama!
he goes to his father. He didn't call his mama.
Oh, oh, you bad now, huh? You bad.
Yes. You see these. What dad could we possibly be talking about today on Every Black Man in Hollywood Even Has a Story? Welcome, everyone. It is the Black Prospector coming at you today with Every Black Man in Hollywood edition has a story. You see, I have these little tension balls, I guess, as they call them. And it should give you a hint for those of you who already know outside of the title as to what dad I'm going to be focused on today. And this is another man on my Mount Rushmore fathers of black fathers that were presented to us in the media. That man, Furious Styles, better known as Lawrence Fishburne. Now, Furious Styles in Boyz-N-The-Hood was his name. This is the father. If James Evans, and definitely check out my videos on James Evans, and I'm so glad to be doing this one on Furious Styles or Larry Fishburne or Lawrence Fishburne, doing it on him while he's still alive. Unfortunately, when I did my James Evans videos, they were mostly after he passed away, except for the ones that I did with my friend Mark. You can find that video as well, where we analyzed and broke down the impact of All in the Family and Good Times. But now today we're going to look at the other father that kind of took me the rest of the way. If James was the dad that I saw at home, but then also, that's kind of the dad I modeled myself in overall, let's say, growing up, I saw my father as being more like him. But when it came to Furious Styles, I saw a bit of my father in him when Trey was younger. And then I saw this was the man that I was now because I became a father at 19. Boyz-N-The-Hood came out in 1991 when I was 21. And I'm watching Furious Styles have to raise this young man. And that was me. I was now in that position of having to raise a young man. So between James Evans, between Furious Styles, well, if you don't know me, that's really me as a father. My kids will probably testify on that one. But let me give you the background here. Now, Furious Styles was portrayed by Lawrence Fishburne in John Singleton's Boyz-N-The-Hood in 1991, and it stands as still one of the most iconic father figures in cinematic history. His character is a guiding force in the life of his son, Trey Styles, and serves as the film's kind of moral center, delivering profound lessons on responsibility, systematic racism, and manhood. I used to go around, I had a 79 Cutlass, and on the front of it, I had Righteous Teacher on there. Now you could say that probably came after the Poor Righteous Teachers, but that was when we used to go to the place and get a little airbrush license plate to put on the front of your car. And it wasn't that I was being self-aggrandizing as a righteous teacher, but I realized that now that I was a father with a young son, it was my job to be his teacher, and I always did like to mentor and kick it, even with other young men that was younger than I was. But now I had to drop some nuggets and some wisdom on these young brothers as I was now a father. And I'm trying to tell them, don't go the way that I was going. And that's kind of the relationship I saw with Furious. Now, Furious Styles' character was a strong, disciplined, and highly intelligent man. And unlike many other father figures in films set in kind of tough urban environments, Furious was actively present in his son's life. And he was shaping Trey to be a responsible and a thoughtful young black man. He was not just a father, but he was also a mentor. He was a philosopher. He was a community leader. And his role is to provide Trey with the tools needed to navigate the perils of how to survive in South Central, a place where busting the cap is fundamental. No, you can't find it in a handbook. Take a close look at a rap crook. Y'all remember how dope that soundtrack was. But anyway, on the perils of South Central Los Angeles, while avoiding the traps that have ensnared so many young black men in their neighborhood. And you saw this being played out in the movie. That on one end here, Furious was trying to protect his kids from hanging out with Lil Doughboy, from hanging out with Lil Chris, from hanging out with, well, even Ricky to a certain degree, and we all know what happened with that. Man, I almost got to stop this video because when I start thinking about Ricky, that's it. And then, of course, you have. I'm going to jump ahead. I'm going to try not to talk about Boys in the Hood because that is my favorite all-time movie, and just focus on Furious Styles. But Furious Styles made the movie. Now, you think about the theatric importance of this film. It was one of the most significant aspects of Furious Styles' character is his deep awareness of social and economic issues that impact the black communities. And think about this movie coming out in 1991. You had everything that was going on now in the country with Rodney King. Later on, it would be O.J. Simpson. And then you would even have so many other racial things were jumping off. We go even into Public Enemy. We were at this age of conscious hip hop and also this era of conscious movies. So it was just a powder keg, and Boys in the Hood came at the right time. And John Singleton wrote this character, Furious Styles, in that script, and he was perfect for really kind of bridging that gap between the old heads and between us new jacks, we'll say, that were now hitting 16, 17, 18, up to 25 years old. And we could relate because we were all going through this social consciousness. Needless to say, we know what they did to the hip hop community just a few short years later, to where everybody, busting bottles and got on their yachts throwing up money in the air. We see how that's turned out for some cats, but I digress. The main point was through his powerful monologues. He educates Trey and his friends about gentrification before we even knew what that word was, crime and self-respect. A memorable scene takes place where Furious takes Trey and his friend Ricky to a billboard advertising real estate in their neighborhood and explains how gentrification works, emphasizing how economic forces displace black residents and strip them of generational wealth. This scene underscores the movie's broader themes of systematic oppression and black empowerment. This is something that will later shape me as a homeschooling father. I had my kids go back to our original home that only two of them were born in. And they looked at that home, which was in the inner city, and then compared that to the suburban home that we moved to that was actually much smaller. And later on, we're living in a rural area, but I had them compare those two homes. One, all black community, another, predominantly white community. What they found was doing the math themselves at the time, now, with internet, Zillow, etc. I had them do the project where they looked at the cost of those homes, and they saw how their larger home, and not just the one that we lived in, but also the one that my parents lived in, that was much larger. It was on a lot and a half of land, had a detached garage. It was much bigger than even the home that they had just moved out of, which was in a nice suburb, 900 square feet and one bathroom. Yeah, y'all, bro had to share that with 6 people. Now you see why Good Times was a movie that I could relate to so much. But anyway, my kids did that. And one of the things that they found was they saw really just on having a house in the suburbs, how that set up generational wealth. When we looked at my grandfather's house and what he couldn't pass down generational wealth, those were lessons that I learned 10 plus years prior from watching Boys in the Hood and watch Furious break that down. Why? Why do you find gun shops? I guess I have to say, why do you find bang bang shops on every corner? Why? Because they want us to blank ourselves. Y'all remember that? That was also in the soundtrack with Stanley Clark. Another defining moment for Furious is his conversation with Trey about SE and responsibility. Unlike other parents who might simply warn their children against teenage pregnancy, Furious frames the discussion as one about self-discipline, respect for women, and the consequences of reckless actions. His candid approach to parenting quickly contrasts with other male figures in the film, many of whom are absent, incarcerated, or they're caught up in cycles of violence in the hood. Y'all remember that scene where he was giving him the talk about protecting himself while he was cutting Trey's head? I think it was it Don't Drink Your Juice While Rolling Through the Hood, or whatever it was by the Wayans brothers. They actually did that scene, and it was funny because the son actually looked older than the father. And that's what they were making fun of, because in a way you had Furious didn't look that much older than Trey in the scene. But the thing about it was, well, that's kind of it. That's how young Furious became a dad. And now he's a single father beefing with Trey's mother, played by Angela Bassett, the lovely Angela Bassett. And I was now going through that with my quote unquote baby mama. I felt that scene because on one end, you're trying to tell your son that I'm definitely thankful you here, but man, my life did not go in the trajectory that I thought it would go because I got careless. And that was a powerful scene. And then yet his boys like Doughboy Ricky, if you remember the mother in there, both of those kids had two different fathers. And they even pointed out in the movie that she was still pining over Ricky's father, but didn't really like Doughboy's father. So that's why Ricky was her favorite. I mean, the movie got deep in even the relationships of the parents, not just the people in the film that we saw all the time that were our age. It was easy to focus on Trey, Ricky, Doughboy, and some of the other ladies. But it really took some maturity to focus on the adults, realizing that where you were watching that movie at 19, 20, 21 years old is where you would probably end up being, especially if you got divorced, or especially if you later had a kid out of wedlock, you might be there within 10 more years or more later. Now, Furious's relationship with Trey is built on tough love. He expects Trey to be accountable for his actions and instills values to help him make ethical decisions. Now, unlike Doughboy, played by Ice Cube, who grows up in a fatherless home and becomes entrenched in gang culture, Trey has a foundation that enables him to choose a different path. Furious frequently reminds Trey that the world will not be kind to him as a young black man and that he must strive for excellence despite the systematic barriers. That's what he had to go through. You remember the scene. Go back to when that robber, the dude came in, middle of the night, not long after Trey started living with his dad. The guy came into the house. Oh, that scene got to me so much because I remember that as a kid. The guy came and broke in the house. Furious pulled out, let's say, that family protector and came out and tried to take one off of that fool. And the guy got through the door with a hole through it. Just got away, and they called the police. The police showed up hours later, and then they treated Furious like he was the bad dude. And I remember my dad doing that, calling the cops over somebody that was in the abandoned house next to ours. I remember as a kid, my father calling the police. They show up hours later, and my father's pretty upset. First of all, what took y'all so long to get here? And then they told my father, well, while you were calling about this, there was another higher priority call. Man, same thing that they would end up pretty much saying in Boyz-N-The-Hood. I remember how helpless my father felt, that he has to take justice in his own hands for things to get done. And it's sad, and that's why that scene was so riveting to me. What impact did that have on Trey growing up? But you know what? At least Trey had a father. That scene could have played out in Doughboy, and you wonder why Doughboy and the rest of the dudes got hooked by the streets. Because when their mama would have had somebody coming up in the house, then the young boy that should be protected had to become the protector. So then it makes sense that the streets would end up where they would go for protection. Because when you're young, you need some protection as well. They try to puff up and man up for mama. And there's a lot of women who will pat that kid on the head and be like, oh, that's right, you mama's little protector. You're not supposed to be mama's protector. As a young man, you are at an age where you are supposed to be protected. And that's the role that we have as fathers. And that's exactly what Furious Styles portrayed in Boyz-N-The-Hood. Not only when Trey was a young man just moving into his house after leaving his mama's house when she couldn't handle him anymore, but he was also that protector, as we're going to find out after what happened to Ricky happened and he wanted to go out and get revenge. His presence in the film is crucial because he represents an alternative to the streets. Through Furious, Singleton crafts a counter narrative to the idea that black fatherhood is absent or ineffective. Instead, Furious is depicted as a highly involved, wise father who prepares his son for the realities of life, offering some hope and resilience. Contrast that with what we saw in a lot of other films. Think of Menace to Society. Think of some of those other films where really the black father is absent, or it's the grandfather that ends up being the one to put the rules down. Harken back to like World War II. But Furious was our generation. He was that we could say maybe a late baby boomer or early Gen X, however you want to count it. Furious was that guy. He had kind of the protection of the old guard, but he also had the masculinity and the manliness that we would need in the new guard. And that wasn't often portrayed in films because by then we started getting films out where a black man was no longer the protector. He was the one that was always out there doing the robbing, stealing, all the grimy stuff. Him being in his home, him protecting his kids, oh, that was leaving with Oprah Winfrey at that time. And it's something that we will still see in films pretty much today. Now, if we think about Lawrence Fishburne's performance, Lawrence delivered a career defining performance as Furious Styles, at least to me. Some of you might feel he did that as Ike Turner in What's Love Got to Do with It. Others may feel he was that guy. That was his career moment when he was in The Matrix, of course, or Othello, even for those really artistic bougie folks. But his portrayal exudes authority, wisdom, and emotional depth. All the things that we need as strong black fathers or as any father. Fishburne's commanding voice and measured demeanor makes Furious a believable and compelling father figure. His ability to deliver monologues with a balance of passion and control, it adds weight to the film's social commentary. And how did he do that? I wonder if I ever have a chance to talk to him, I would wonder how much him sitting back and doing this in the film really helped him stay calm and deliver the lines that he delivered. Of course, he would end up playing a similar character in Higher Learning. And I think it may be one of the house parties. I think, or maybe it was Higher Learning. I think it was Higher Learning with Omar Epps, where he played I think it was a dean. And again, it was a very similar character where he just laid back and dropped nuggets. Now, Fishburne's chemistry with Cuba Gooding Jr., who played Trey, is another highlight of the film. Their dynamic is just authentic. It resembles a real life father son relationship in so many ways. Fishburne's subtle expressions, such as his stern yet affectionate gaze at his moments of vulnerability, further solidify his role as a complex and layered character. And isn't that how we have to be as fathers? Where sometimes we're not simple. I had one of my coaches told me that one of the biggest misnomers that even men buy into that women say is that, oh, well, men are simple creatures. They're easy to please. We're not that simple. We may be easy to please because we're used to sacrificing for ourselves for the good of the family, but we're not simple. We're complex because we have to, on one end, turn ourselves into being like a Morpheus on the Matrix, into being the one to meter out discipline and punishment with fury that may even have to end that way, either be our destruction or another man's destruction. But then at the same time, we have to be loving. We have to kiss the wife. We have to kiss the children, hug the children. We have to tell everyone we love them. But at the same time, being willing to wield the sword. For you religious, that's probably how you would think of your God as being the same thing. As an evangelical Christian, that would probably, and I don't use the term evangelical, so let's be, but to give y'all a bucket, certainly that's the characteristics we even see with God. You see the character of being very firm and willing to wield the sword, but at the same time being very loving, graceful, merciful. And that's what we saw with Furious Styles. Now we have to talk about Lawrence Fishburne's legendary career. He was born July 30th, 1961 in Augusta, Georgia. He began acting at a young age, landing his first notable role as Joshua Hall on the TV soap opera One Life to Live. And in the early 70s, he gained further recognition for his portrayal as Tyrone Clean Miller in Apocalypse Now, which showcases early talent for playing intense and charismatic characters. He also played in a film called Cornbread and Earl. I think that was his first ever acting role. Now, his career milestones throughout the 1980s and early 1990s, Fishburne built a solid career with films such as The Cotton Club in 1984 and School Days in 1988. Y'all know, go back and watch School Days in 1988. Wake up! Wake up!
Please, wake up.
That was Lawrence Fishburne. He looked old in. It was like, man, what is 40-year-old dude on campus? But, that was him. However, his performance as Furious Styles in Boyz-N-The-Hood in 91 catapulted him into the spotlight. His ability to portray strong, intelligent, and authoritative characters made him a sought-after actor in Hollywood. In 1993, Fishburne made history by becoming the first black actor to portray Othello in a major film adaptation of Shakespeare's play. This solidified his reputation as a versatile performer capable of taking on classic roles. And I think we see that over Fishburne's career, whether he plays Othello, whether he plays a kind of a combination between that strength and between his character Furious Styles in The Matrix or as in Higher Learning, or even if he's just kind of playing, doggone Ike Turner, or when he played in Blackish, when he was Dre's father in there. He kind of has that Ike Turner character, but that is the range that great actor he does almost like no other. Of course, most of you younger folks are going to know him for The Matrix and beyond. In 1999, Fishburne's career reached new heights as his role as Morpheus in the Matrix trilogy. His portrayal of a wise, enigmatic mentor to Keanu Reeves, Neo became one of the most iconic performances, but Morpheus, much like Furious Styles, serves as a guide who offers profound wisdom and philosophical insights, reinforcing Fishburne's ability to play mentor-like figures. Critically acclaimed dramas like Aquila and the Bee in 2006 as well. His work in television, particularly as Dr. Raymond Langston in CSI, Crime Scene Investigation, further showcased his versatility and, of course, his role as Dre's father in Blackish. The legacy and influence of Lawrence Fishburne remains a powerhouse in the entertainment industry, but his performance in Boyz-N-The-Hood, Over the Matrix, and even some of the other films really have left a long-lasting impact on cinema and on the black male image. His ability to portray characters with wisdom, with strength, and emotional depth has made him one of Hollywood's most respected actors. In addition to acting, Fishburne has taken on roles of producer and director, further expanding his influence in the film industry. His dedication portraying complex and meaningful characters continues to inspire both audiences and aspiring actors. So, as we get ready to wrap this up, I bought these because of Furious Styles. Furious Styles in Boyz-N-The-Hood is more than just a character. He is a symbol of strong black fatherhood, wisdom, and resilience. Through Lawrence Fishburne's masterful portrayal, Furious became one of the most powerful impact figures in film history for black men, leaving an enduring legacy in both cinema and cultural discussions on fatherhood and systematic injustice. And we have to talk about that ending of Boyz-N-The-Hood, because it's that ending of Boyz-N-The-Hood that really solidified his role in his film and as Furious Styles. From the time that Furious Styles decided to raise his son, when his mom said, "You go over your daddy's house because you're getting in too much trouble." And when he looked at all those fellas that Trey was hanging out with, he said, "One day, you don't want to be in trouble like the rest of them." And then, of course, that moment that Ricky was taken out, walking through the alley. Two young men, just from being in that hood, would have their lives go in totally separate directions, because one would perish, and the other one would now really try to get out the hood. And for those who, of course, have seen the movie, you know that powerful scene when Trey, after holding the body of his best and close friend, Mama! He goes to his father. He didn't call his mama.
Oh, you bad now, huh?
He didn't go and be like, "Mama." I mean, it wasn't for cell phones at that time. He was like, "Mama, mama." He went to his father, and his father looked at his clothes, and he just held him. He just held him. And he let his son cry. But then he had to be firm, and he had to say, "Trey, that's Ricky Mama's problem. You my problem."
But that's their problem, Trey. You my son. You my problem.
And he had to calm his son down. Dads, how many of you had the strength to do that? Dads, how many of you are in your home that you would even be able to have that conversation with your son when the streets are calling for him? When they try not to be in some mess, because we all think we live in that life at 16, 17, 18 years old, or maybe even a little older. Dads, how many of you were there when your son had that moment that was about to be the most unforgivable moment of his life? Furious was there. He set a pattern that at least I saw as a young man that I wanted to be there for my sons as well. And even when Trey snuck out the house, if you recall, the scene goes when they were rolling up trying to find those dudes at the restaurant, old Jerry Curl, and Furious was just in the chair because he knew it was nothing he could do. He couldn't go find his son. Again, this wasn't no Life 360 that he can go see where his son was at. But he had to trust that the things that he had instilled in that boy all his life were now going to come back and hold him. And that powerful John Singleton scene that he put together, where they're rolling in the convertible, and Trey is thinking about everything that happens. And he said, yo, pull over. Let me out. And Doughboy and the rest of them looking at him like he the biggest punk and that he weak, that he's not going to finish the mission. And he said, let me out. And he jumped on out. And he went back home. Doughboy and the rest of them will go and carry out the revenge. But Trey went back home. And later on, he ended up going to college. But that's the role that, as a black father, and as all fathers, again, this channel is made mostly because I'm talking to black men because I am one. But I understand this. I'm on the side of all fathers that's putting in that work to keep their sons off the street, to keep their daughters off the pole, and to raise their families as best as they possibly can. If you have not watched Boyz-N-The-Hood, just please go watch it or go watch it again, but pay attention to Furious Styles. And then as another side treat, go watch a couple episodes of Good Times, and maybe you will see why these two fathers changed my life forever. Never underestimate the power of images that go before your kids, which is why we shouldn't be quick to put them in front of the TV or in today, put them in front of the computer and YouTube. Because who are you shaping them to be in the future? Or who are you allowing to shape them in the future? I'm thankful that my parents put in me James Evans and they let him shape me. And I'm thankful that at least when I was at my wild age, that I had Furious Styles there to help shape me to be the father that I will later become as well in my future. How about you? Let me know your favorite maybe Boyz-N-The-Hood moment or your favorite Furious Styles moment. I would love to hear it. And hey, Lawrence Fishburne, if you ever see this video, thank you, man. Thank you for taking that role because a brother sure appreciates it. And I want to give you your followers now before it's too late, like it was with John Amos. Thank you, brother, because that's true art. Until next time, y'all, peace, be safe, and seek the other path. Seek your third path. Be your own prospector. Raise your kids the way you want them to be and not according to the way the culture wants them to be. Raise kids that are going to be bold enough that when everyone else is going to do what they do, they're willing to say, let me out. And they can come back and feel firm and not have something that's going to change their life based on the things you taught them, not everybody else. Peace.